Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at this webinar on preparations for COP27. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping details to mention. First, as mentioned in the chat, the webinar does have interpretation services in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. To access your preferred language, you need to click on the globe icon down at the bottom toolbar of the Zoom window on your computer on the lower right end, and you should choose the language that you would prefer to speak in and to hear. Also, please, in the chat box, I see some people are already doing it. Introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining from so that we know who is with us. And then hopefully, if all goes well, we'll have time for questions and answers with the speakers. So we encourage you to use the chat box as a space where you can pose questions, and we'll bring them to the speakers so that there can be a bit of interaction before the end of this session. Good, so let's get started. My name's Lucinda O'Hanlon. As it says on the slide, I'm the head of policy and strategy at Sanitation and Water for All. And in a little more than a month, we're going to be in Egypt, which is hosting COP27. This meeting is being referred to as the Adaptation COP, and it's expected that there will be a focus on strengthening adaptation and resilience, limiting the impacts of climate change, facilitating a just transition, and increasing funding and collaboration for essential climate solutions. Water is expected to feature prominently at this year's COP meeting under the leadership of the government of Egypt. And we're very pleased that Dr. Ayman Soliman, head of the planning sector for the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, joined this meeting earlier today. And we're going to be showing a recording of her remarks with you so that everyone can benefit from the information that she shared. SWA is taking an active role in the COP27 preparations. We're part of the steering committee of the COP27 Water and Climate Pavilion, and we're coordinating our partners to provide inputs to some other COP-related initiatives, including for the first time a COP flagship initiative on water called Action for Water Adaptation and Resilience, or AWARE. And also COP27, for the first time, will have a day dedicated to water in the official presidency program. That's going to be on the 14th of November. Our focus at SWA is on prioritizing attention to the billions globally who still do not have access to basic services. These are the same communities who are experiencing the most severe impacts of climate change. And this is especially pertinent at a COP that's hosted on the African continent, where millions of these individuals live. To build community resilience of populations at risk, it's also crucial to understand whether they have access to water and sanitation. Our work has shown that communities with reliable access to safe water and sanitation are better equipped to respond to climate change. Beyond adaptation, there are huge untapped opportunities for mitigation by improving water supply and energy efficiency, and by ensuring, where possible, the use of renewable energy for water and sanitation operations. Another important aspect that SWA is focusing on is highlighting the importance of directing a fair share of climate financing to build the resilience of basic water supply and sanitation services. Not only the existing services, but also the ones yet to be built. Through the work of SWA partners and the Secretariat, we can positively influence the inclusion of water supply, sanitation, and hygiene in climate negotiations at the national and global levels. And to do this, today, we seek to enhance understanding about how the COP27 meeting fits in the global landscape, the efforts of the government of Egypt as the hosts, and what partners can do to engage at the national level. We will highlight national level activities to prepare COP delegations to attend the meeting, and will provide the opportunity to discuss how WASH stakeholders can brief their country delegations so that they are ready to discuss with other parties at COP27 how water and sanitation can be reflected in the discussions and the outcome documents. At this point, I would like to transition our discussion to SWA's climate advisor, Jose Gesti. Jose will provide us with background information on COP27 that could help partners better understand what happens at a COP, who attends, how to engage in negotiation discussions. Dr. Imam's recorded remarks will then follow and will address Egypt's leadership, in particular in providing opportunities for water to have a prominent role in the meeting through the Water Pavilion, the Water Day, and the Aware initiative that I just mentioned. So with that, over to you, Jose.
Thank you very much, Lucinda. Gracias, Lucinda. I will be making my presentation in Spanish, so if you want to use the translation. Muchas gracias, Lucinda, de nuevo.
Thank you very much again, Lucinda. Knowing that sometimes our partners on water, sanitation, hygiene lack some experience on the different processes regarding climate planning at a global level, my intention with the next 3 slides is to provide with some explanations and guidelines for all the participants of this webinar so they can have a better idea on what a COP, the Conference of the Parties, is, who the attendants are, and the topics discussed during the COP meetings. Next slide, please. Like I said, the idea now is to have a very brief introduction on what a COP is. Before I explain what a COP is, let me please go back and explain that the Framework Convention, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, established, it's the UNFCCC, as it's called usually, and what it did was to establish an international environment treaty to combat climate change, and that happened during the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992. That convention came into force in 1994. Nowadays, in 2022, the Framework Convention has 198 signing members. Through this Climate Change Framework Convention, a secretariat was established, and its name is the same. It's also named UNFCCC. The secretariat's headquarters in Bonn, and in charge of supporting the operation of the convention. This introduction, I can now tell you that the supreme decision-making body of the Framework Convention is precisely what's called the Conference of the Parties, the COP, the COP. When the Conference of the Parties gathers, that's the main climate diplomacy events of the year, and the goal is to assess progress in dealing with climate change. First COP happened in Berlin in 1995, and this year, November, Egypt will host number 27. I would like to mention the Paris Agreement. It's also important to explain it in this brief presentation. But before that, I also want to refer to the Kyoto Protocol. As many of you will know, it was signed in 1997 and it was developed in...
Supuso la primera implementación de medidas en base a la Convención Marco. Entonces, después de esto, el Protocolo de Kioto es sustituido por el Acuerdo de París, que se adopta en la COP21 en el año 2015 en París. Y el Acuerdo de París entra en vigor en el año 2016 con el objetivo, como algunos de ustedes sabrán, de limitar el calentamiento global a menos de 2 grados centígrados y, en la medida de lo posible, de hecho, limitar este aumento a 1,5 grados centígrados. Bajo,
Jose, I'm sorry to interrupt you. The English translation has just dropped. I think we need to stop for a moment until the interpreters are back online. I apologize, Jose.
no problem at all.
My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Please continue, Jose.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Perfect. No problem. So we are discussing about this short introduction as to what is a COP. We're discussing the Kyoto Protocol is... perdón, ahora en español, ahora me lié yo. Perdón. Estábamos hablando de esta pequeña introducción a la COP, ¿verdad? Y estábamos viendo cómo el protocolo de Kioto es sustituido por el Acuerdo de París, que entra en vigor en el año 2016, para limitar el incremento de temperatura. Y lo que... de 2 grados, ¿verdad? Y en la medida de lo posible limitar el incremento de temperatura a 1,5 grados centígrados. Estaba diciendo entonces que bajo el Acuerdo de París, los países signatarios se comprometieron a presentar planes nacionales que establezcan cuánto se van a reducir las emisiones de gases.
Jose, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but there's still no English translation.
Is this working now?
I can hear you now, sir. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Jose, let's try one more time.
No problem, no problem.
Thank you.
We were having a very brief introduction on what a COP is. A COP is the the supreme decision-making body, meeting once a year. The first COP happened in 1995, and number 27 will be held in a few weeks in Egypt. And we mentioned that the Kyoto Protocol is an implementation mechanism for a number of actions agreed upon under the framework of the convention, and the Kyoto Protocol was replaced by the Paris Agreement. It came into force in 2016 after COP21 with a firm commitment to limit the global warming to less than 2 degrees centigrade. The signing countries of the convention commit since then to elaborate national plans called the Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs. And in these plans, each country determines what the contributions will be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. These plans are to be reviewed every 5 years. And last year in Glasgow, during COP26, they measured their contributions of all countries, and they established that it was not enough and so without waiting for 5 years, they agreed upon to review and improve the national commitments. With this short introduction to OP, we wanted to present a few brushstrokes on who participates in COPs and COPs. The purpose today is to understand who the participants are and how we can impact on their delegations. I said before that the first COP was held in Berlin 1995. The Conference of the Parties meets almost every year ever since, with a firm purpose to manage the fight against climate change. Every country has a delegation of experts to agree, if possible, or at least to discuss the way to take with the rest of the countries. There are representatives of the parties in the convention, and there are also observant states, such as the Vatican. They have not ratified the convention yet, but they are interested and they do take part. Also, in the COP, during the weeks while it's held, there are thousands of observers and media coverage. As climate change gains coverage, COPs grow more and more important with more and more participants. As we can see on this chart, there are three categories: the parties or stakeholders, representatives and observers, observing countries. On the other hand, observers, and then the members of the press. The parties of the agreement are national states and also the European Union, all of them having ratified the convention, which gives them the right to participate fully in the negotiations. The other observing organizations, not the observer state, but the observer organization, are divided into three main groups. The observer organizations are part of UN specialized agencies, international intergovernmental organizations, and also non-governmental organizations. When these organizations are observers, they are granted the right to attend, and they can also participate in some of the plenary sessions and deliberations, even if they are excluded from the most official discussion. They are kept in a room called the Blue Area, which is outside the room where the negotiations take place. Access to that room is limited to signing and observer states. On the right, you can see that there is a gender disparity in the participants. The gap is being bridged. It's not bridged yet, but it's being reduced at least. There is some way to go until parity in representation is reached. In the last slide, I've included some ideas on the topics discussed in COPs. This is the first one. We've used this to examine progress and identify pending challenges and how the next targets can be set, or the next goals. COPs are vital to supervise progress made so far and also to set new goals.
De poder alcanzar los objetivos del Acuerdo de París.
So we are in a position to reach the Paris Agreement's goals. Some of the clear topics discussed during the COPs are the four ones set by the Egyptian presidency for COP27. First topic is mitigation. COP will be a time for countries to explain how they are complying with their commitment and trying to meet them, and also to improve their proposals. Adaptation. COP27's goal is to set and improve action agenda with adaptation, placing adaptation in the front line or global action. Regarding climate financing, another big issue at the COP
del financiamiento
The
climático
importance of
podrán imaginar para lograr
possibility
los
of
objetivos
finance is
con este fin,
key to reach the Paris Agreement's goals. And to that end, there is a need of more transparency
para satisfacer las
of
necesidades de los países en desarrollo,
financing flows and facilitate access to developing countries, especially those
islas,
least developed countries in
el cuarto objetivo que
Africa and also the island developing countries.
aquí
The
es que
fourth
los
one is
gobiernos
collaboration.
y la sociedad civil trabajen
The
de
goal
manera
is to make government, private sector, and civil society
interactuamos con nuestro
to
planeta.
work together.
Como Lucinda les ha explicado en sus comentarios de introducción,
Like
el agua
Lucinda
este
said
año
before, in the introductory comments, water will play a major role this year in the COP discussions. And we want you to be aware of this so you can
actualizar, ¿verdad? Cómo nos pueden poner
assess how your delegations should be, and you could also update them.
Ahora le pasamos la
From
palabra
our side,
tenemos la
that's
grabación
all, and we now give the floor to
del agua.
the Egyptian focal point,
Su presentación.
Dr. Iman Soliman. We're now going to see his presentation.
Lucía, no sé si nos puedes ayudar porque no
Can you help us with this, Lucinda? We can't hear.
no escuchamos la voz de Dr. Imán por el momento.
We can't hear the voice so far.
Disculpen la molestia, estamos tratando de
Sorry
averiguar
about the
bien,
inconvenience.
no estamos escuchando todavía el sonido.
We do see the recording, but we can't hear her voice.
No conseguimos escuchar a Lucía.
We still can't hear anything.
Creo que tenemos que en la opción de compartir acceder al compartir el audio del vídeo al mismo tiempo. Sí. ¿Podemos probar, por favor?
Could we try that, please?
Jose, in light of the time, I think maybe we could show the slides from this morning and talk through the main points that Dr. Iman covered if the video is not working.
Sí.
I'm going to try one more time. And
Okay, thank you, Lucia. In the meantime, Jose, if you could get the other slides up. I apologize, everyone, for this inconvenience, technical difficulties.
Opportunity for me to present the effort started with Egypt to have water on the top of the climate agenda. Actually, Egypt started to take the role to move water from the margin, the climate conference. As you may know, the scarce countries and the African countries also in the region, in Arab region and in Mediterranean area, they are suffering from the climate change. So we would like to bring water as a scarce countries on the top of the climate agenda. Egypt started to prepare for the COP27, starting from next month with Cairo Water Week on main theme, water at heart of climate actions, and would like to move from talking and from planning to action and to commitment. So during Cairo Water Week, we will prepare for several, and we will prepare ourselves for the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, inshallah. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank you as a SWA. You are part of the steering committee for the Water Pavilion, and you helped Egypt in different aspects in completing the Water Pavilion and different activities toward the COP27. For the Water Pavilion, Egypt takes the lead to continue the effort and to build on what we had achieved last year in Glasgow for the first Water Pavilion, and we formulated a steering committee from 5 countries, where we have Germany, we have Tajikistan, Netherlands, and UK and Egypt leading the effort with help of 5 organizations, SWA, among them FEO, the main partner, and also we have SIWI, we have AGWA, we have EMI, and both of us worked for months to have the pavilion on a good shape, and we already started to talk with the organization team. We have 20 square meter pavilion in the blue zone, where we will have enough space either for networking, for technical session, and also for booths for maybe some successful stories to be disseminated in the pavilion. We also started to formulate task groups, and we put attention to the messages to negotiators. So we have team from the steering committee working to formulate key messages and also to deliver those key messages to the leader and the summit leaders. We have working group, we have logistic team, where they did a fantastic job to make the pavilion is a brilliant one and to assure all the facilities for the participant. And also we have many groups for thematic topics, and recently we finalized the main theme, and we started the process of finalizing the final program, the day-to-day one. And we have with our colleague from SIWI a fantastic cooperation toward the fundraising, where we are able to finance the needed expenses to have the pavilion implemented with good and with enough logistic and attractive one. And at the end, we have communication and key messaging team. We have SWA working closely with us. We have AGWA, we have SIWI, so many technical team working on formatting messages and how we will deliver it. And also we are working how we can make the messages to be delivered to all climate community. Next, please. As I mentioned, we already finalized the main themes, where we try to some extent follow last year procedures to discuss the presidency team ahead before the main program theme, to enable the water community to interact with most of the high-level participants, and then we can convey our messages to those people and they can reflect during the side events for the thematic day. And we finalize with the following program, where we will have our program started on 8th of November with finance climate resilience through investors in water. And we have our lead institute, African and Asian Development Bank, with WRI. And we have for the second day, climate resilience and low carbon approaches, system and technologies, where we have ESCWA and UNESCO leading the organization of such a day. At the third day, we will have disaster risk reduction and sustainable city for improving livelihood. And we see this is a very important topic. We will have, as a leading institute, UNDRR and UNESCO and EMI. For the fourth day, we will have climate smart agriculture and food security, adaptation, and sustainability, which is important for the world, especially after the overall supply chain crisis. And we will have FAO and IMI on charge to supervise this day. For fifth day, we will have water and climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience and cooperation. We see cooperation on sectorial basis or on regional basis will be a good start for adaptation and resilience, and where we will have Egypt as a Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, AGWA and GWB on the lead institute. Then we will have water, energy, and the climate nexus. We will have UNDP and ADBF as a lead institute. After that, we will have water and biodiversity natural-based solution, which may be a solution for Africa. Most of African countries, they need some natural-based solution and as well low cost. We need to focus on the impact of several extreme weather events on either on coastal area or the water resources, and how we can find a natural-based solution to solve this action. We will have WWF and IUCN on the lead institute. After that, we will have inclusion and accelerating youth, indigenous, and gender actions on climate change, and we would like to hear from different actors and those.
I'm sorry, participants, we understand from several of you that you cannot hear. I was hearing it well, but we've decided to stop the video because it is having problems, and Jose is going to show you the remaining slides and talk through them quickly so that we can move on to the panel without delay. Jose.
Yes, thank you. Let me just please prepare the presentation. Yes. Just give me 1 second. I will be as quick as I can. Okay. Sorry for the delay. I'm just sharing my screen now. Can you please let me know if you see the slide?
Yes, please proceed.
Bueno, entonces, Dr. Iman nos estaba haciendo.
So Dr. Iman was going through the program for the Water and Climate Pavilion at COP27. So as you can see, we have a program running from 8th November to 18th November. We have different thematic days. And as she was explaining, we can see here the different themes for each day. So on the first day, we're going to talk about financing. Another day, we're going to talk about mitigation. A very important day is the 5th day, where we're going to talk more in general terms about water and climate. Day number 8 is a day where we will talk about inclusion, gender. We'll also talk about indigenous diversity, etc. On the 9th day, as you can see, we will focus more on water supply and sustainable development. That day will be led by UNICEF, WHO, and ourselves, SWA. So this is basically the program that's been planned day by day. And now we just wanted to show you how water is going to have a relevant position during this COP. And it shows the importance of how a presidency of a COP, in this case Egypt, can launch a flagship initiative based on water. This is the first time this happens during a COP, and this gives us the idea of how important water is going to be during this COP. There is a specific day where we will focus, according to the presidency, where we will focus on water. Then we have the Cairo Water Week, which will take place in mid-October between the 16th and 19th of that month. And this year it's being used to prepare for the COP27, where the official Water Pavilion program will be announced, and where this flagship initiative will be launched, as well as other high-level events. But as I was saying, basically this Cairo Water Week will be a preparatory platform for the COP27. And without further ado, I think we can move on to our panel discussion. So I will stop sharing my screen now and see if Lucinda can now show us the other presentation where we've got the slides with our panel discussion for today. Perfect. Okay, so now we are going to spend a few minutes listening to our panelists. On one side, we have His Excellency Javier Gutiérrez, who is the Secretary of the Presidency for Climate Change and the Deputy Minister for Environment and Natural Resources. However, he is not feeling well, so we have here with us someone from his office, which is Eduardo Flores. And then, as part of this panel, we also have Mr. José Álvarez Sala, who is, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find his position in Spanish. He is a specialist advisor in UNICEF and who is now working on WASH initiatives. So I would like to ask the first question to the representative of Nicaragua, Eduardo Flores. So basically, we know that you in Nicaragua have a lot of experience in climatic negotiations at the global level. And regarding water, you played a very important role during COP26, since you were the deputy president. So I think that your experience is very important. And our question for you is, how do you think that the Nicaraguan delegation is preparing for COP27? What does it look like? And we also want to ask you to share your opinion with us regarding the possible entry points for the water and sanitation sector during the negotiations in the short term towards COP27, but also if you can share with us your recommendations for the long term based on the trajectory that you have seen with other sectors such as oceans, agriculture, etc. So how do you think that water can be a part of those negotiations? So you have the floor, Mr. Eduardo. I think that you have a presentation. So if you can please share your screen. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if the presentation is ready. I don't think we need to share it at the moment, but I think we need to talk about this because it's important. My name is Eduardo Flores. I'm a specialist in climate change and I work in the Ministry of Climate Change in the Republic of Nicaragua. And I'm here representing the Deputy Minister, Javier Gutiérrez, who apologizes because he's not feeling too well today, so wasn't able to attend this meeting. And so I am here to talk to you about very important issues for human race, such as water and sanitation, these very two important topics. In Nicaragua, we have a long experience regarding negotiations regarding climate change. And it is important to understand that the experience that we have through many years of hard work means that we understand that now we need to prepare well in advance, not only by organizing the topics that will be discussed during the COP, but also by holding those conversations that need to take place with the different delegations that come there, that meet there from around the world. COP is a UN mechanism for negotiating environmental issues, but a party on its own does not have the required power to convince everyone and to respond to all the interests of all the countries around the world. So I think that something that's been very successful in our case as a delegation in previous COP meetings is that ability to negotiate with other parties and to reach consensus regarding common issues. Regarding water and sanitation, in Nicaragua, we've got a very clear legislation regarding the recovery of water sources. Nicaragua has a climate change policy at the national level, which was just an update of previous law that we had, which was established in 2019 and which we recently updated, as I say, where we have included the issue of water and sanitation. We've done it in a cross-sectional way because in Nicaragua, climate change has different pillars. We've got adaptation, where we include the WASH issues. We also have mitigation pillar, where we also include in a cross-sectional way the water and sanitation. We also have the pillar of development, and we have also included there in that pillar water and sanitation. And then we've got the pillar of governance, where we also include the issues of water and sanitation. In other words, in Nicaragua, we are strongly committed to water and sanitation issues. In all international negotiations, there are certain national interests which are taken into account, and that's why Nicaragua has always been a part of different negotiation groups. Nicaragua has been a part of those groups where we always suggest different discussion topics. And last year, in the last COP meeting, we issued certain statements which are the short-term strategies which we can use to introduce different topics in the COP. These are known as submissions to the COP. And these submissions are discussed in the different negotiation groups. And Nicaragua is a member of the ALBA group, where Nicaragua submits those proposals for topic discussions. Nicaragua is also a member of the GRULAC group, which is the Latin American Caribbean group of countries, where we also talk and discuss about different issues which are of common interest to the members of that group. And we are also a part of the CELAC, another group, and where we also discuss common issues. And we're also a member of the SICA group, which is the Central American Integration System. And there we discuss different issues with other countries in order to be able to then discuss those at the COP. It is important to understand that those discussions, as a result of the nature of the COP, are negotiations that can be in a medium and long term, because we are discussing very relevant topics, and in order for all the parties to be able to adopt them, we need long discussions. And water and sanitation is a very important issue for all developing countries, and especially for those countries which suffer more the impact of climate change. That's why it is so important that we start to talk about this issue in a more general way so that we can issue a joint declaration or submission so we can present it to the COP. So it's important to understand the procedure in order to be able to ensure that all countries can participate in these discussions. It is also important that all the research carried out include water and focus on the consequences of climate change and how climate change can affect water and sanitation sector. Water is an important issue in the COP, and if drinking water and sanitation are directly related to climate change, it's important for these issues to be included so that all the parties involved in the convention and the UN Framework Convention can discuss and participate in those discussions. So it is important to take all of this into account. Thank you very much, Mr. Flores, because you are giving us very important points here, like entry points, and how can water and sanitation be a part of those negotiations. And indeed, you have responded with very tangible points and interesting ways of doing this. In the short term, we can do this through those submissions that you mentioned. And from what you have said, we understand that we need to take it slowly because it's important to present the topic, then we need to reach agreements, and then we need to continue discussing according to your experience until we reach a consensus. No, and then we can include it in part of those discussions. So thank you very much for your intervention. It's very useful. But we need to try to finish this session on time. So we are now going to move on to a second panelist, who is Jorge Alvarez Sala, who is a senior advisor at UNICEF. UNICEF is a partner who has been involved in preparing the water pavilion at the COP and is working together with WHO and with us as the SWA, and we are all in charge of the discussions that will take place during this pavilion regarding water and sanitation. So my question for Jorge is, can you please tell us what is UNICEF's opinion regarding the role that water can play in the negotiations and among the parties interested in water and sanitation, and what role can it play, what can the states play in order to inform the different delegations regarding the issue of water? Thank you very much.
Speak in English because I think there are some problems with the translation, with the channel in English. But of course, I'm bilingual. I speak Spanish is my mother tongue. As UNICEF, we are pleased to see the government of Egypt's leadership in bringing water to the COP, both through the AWARE initiative that was presented by Dr. Aman, which is one of the COP27 presidency initiatives that aims at bringing water to the negotiation table for the first time ever, and also the support to the second ever water pavilion. The high number of participants to this webinar and the previous one organized by SWA a few hours ago, as well as the very large number of proposals received for the water pavilion, shows that the wash sector is increasingly looking at climate change as an issue that requires increased attention. We have to keep in mind that the main objective of COPs, and as Jose, you mentioned and you explained very clearly, COP27 aims at bringing together world leaders to act together to limit temperature rise and climate change, and COP27 is likely to emphasize climate finance and climate adaptation. Our experience from previous COPs, in particular COP26 Water Pavilion, is that the water sector is underrepresented in the big climate discussions, and WASH is almost completely absent. This is very worrying, considering that climate change is felt primarily through a change in water, too much water or too little water. But we cannot blame the climate sector for that, or not only them. The WASH sector needs to do its homework and shift the ways of working to be part of the solution. UNICEF developed the climate resilient framework back in 2014 and initiated its own shift in 2019, and is committed to completely shift all of its $1 billion annual investment in the sector to be climate resilient. We are also supporting a number of countries in doing that shift, and we invite other partners to also revise the ways of working and contributing towards a more sustainable, climate resilient and low carbon sector. This year, COP27 is branded as the African COP and as the adaptation COP. And we need to remember that in Africa, there are millions of people living in the overlap of lack of access to water supply and sanitation, and at the same time, very high vulnerability and high exposure to climate impacts. UNICEF estimates that there are 1.4 billion people living in areas affected by high or extremely high water insecurity. And a significant proportion of them live in the African continent. And there is no water security if there is no service, right? And as a WASH sector, we need to keep in mind that the most vulnerable groups, those with no service, are often the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and water insecurity. From a water supply and sanitation point of view, we need that climate planners and water managers understand each other and understand better the interconnectivities between climate change, water as a resource, and the basic social services that depend on it. Importantly, safely managed drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene services. It is too often that climate planners tell us that there is no straightforward for them to understand the link between, for example, climate change and sanitation. So we certainly need to explain ourselves better. And I think compañero Eduardo Flores made a very, very good point on this. As you know, UNICEF has a very strong country presence, and over the last years, we have been working strongly to integrate climate into water supply and sanitation programming. A first step to do that is to widen the scope of the partners we work with. And we are now much more in touch with climate planners and policymakers in countries we are willing to coordinate efforts with other WASH stakeholders to understand better how country delegations to COP, for instance, look like, and to brief them with the adaptation needs of basic services, as well as the opportunities they represent to build community resilience to climate change. With this, I'm making a call to action to start moving in this direction. It is now 5 weeks before COP27, and I am sure that UNICEF and partners can contribute through its country presence to brief delegations and negotiators on the importance of water. At least myself, and I think everybody in this webinar, we are dreaming on a COP27 outcome document that mentions the importance of water, hopefully, specifically drinking water supply and sanitation, to achieve a global goal on adaptation. That's my dream. I believe that what we are seeing at the moment with the AWARE initiative and with other initiatives, we can reposition and contribute to reposition water and WASH in particular in the climate negotiations. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you very much, Jorge. That was really great to hear about your call to action and your dreams, which is, I think, our shared dreams. So we are all dreaming along the same pages, and hopefully your call to action for colleagues in countries to brief the delegations is one of the key takeaway messages from this webinar. I will thank you again, Jorge. I will hand over now to Lucinda.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you to our colleague from Nicaragua for sharing these examples. There are some questions that have been coming up in the chat. Unfortunately, our technical challenges have meant that we're running short on time, but your questions have been noted. And if you put your email address in the chat, we are happy to stay in touch and tell you more about how preparations for COP are going and what SWA can do to help you. So please do use the chat box to share your contact details, and we're happy to reach out. I'd like to hand the floor to Leslie Porres, who is the co-chair of our high-level political dialogue work group. Leslie, you have the difficult task of summarizing these rich discussions, and I'm sorry that the time is so short, but I know you are quite capable. So over to you, Leslie.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lucinda. I'm sorry that we did run out of time because I was looking forward to hearing more of the questions. I will say honestly that I think Jorge actually just made my job quite a bit easier than it might have been in terms of summarizing, but although he also made some really excellent points. I think today was a really good opportunity for all of us in the water and sanitation community, above all, to learn, right? We all know that climate and water are connected. We all know we want to have a stronger voice present at COP now and moving forward. The how about doing that is obviously sort of the bigger mystery to most of us as we start to learn. And today was a really excellent, really excellent step. We started out by hearing from Jorge, as well as the video from Imam about what is really taking place behind the scenes to position ourselves differently through the Water Pavilion, Cairo Water Week, and opportunities that are sort of emerging through the AWARE initiative. However, it was Mr. Eduardo Flores who really started helping us to come up to speed on the fact that there's a very special structure and process in place that influences what can be said in the actual space in Egypt. And that process is going through these working groups. And so immediately in my head, and then Jose was also putting it forward, is how do we get involved with these different working groups? How do we help them elevate the topic of water and sanitation? We heard from Mr. Flores that this is a hot topic. This is a topic of interest. So there is ample opportunity, as far as I could hear and see, for us to really make those connections and start helping provide that expertise that we have that is needed within this community. But then turning around over to Jorge, he also emphasized that we have a lot of homework to do to really represent ourselves and our goals well. Right. And I really picked up on his points that the climate planners and the water managers need to be able to understand each other. And we need to just take that burden upon ourselves. We need to make it our responsibility. Climate negotiators are negotiating a whole bunch of things. So we should not wait for them to come to us, and we should understand more deeply what we need to say, what language and what terms, what frame we need to bring so that our messages really resonate and stick with them, so that they can bring them forward in their conversation groups, and then have these submissions for the broader consensus. It was really also very, as he said, and I wrote this down, we need to explain ourselves better. We're used to talking to ourselves. We have to talk about ourselves to our colleagues over in climate to help them really understand how interconnected we are. It was also really nice to hear from Jorge about the process and realization that UNICEF has been going through, as it's really been deepening the way it reaches out to its climate negotiation teams and delegations in its various countries. And so basically, I want to go ahead and echo that statement, but elevate it above UNICEF to the entire SWA community, right? SWA is a network. When we mobilize for a sector ministers meeting, when we mobilize for a finance ministers meeting, we need to do the same here. We need to understand, and the homework that I would task for you all is to really understand who is a part of your climate negotiation team. Find out who those people are. Reach out, see if you can organize a couple of introductory meetings, offer to help them, prepare some briefing remarks and help them understand where WASH can fit in to the larger conversations they're having around adaptation as one of the pillars that, as Mr. Flores suggested, and talk about it in other ways. But all of you on this call today should be able to take at least that very first step and just, who are your negotiators, and reach out to them, make that connection, start building that relationship. And the SWA community is also here to support you as you start to advance and move that forward. And then these are the steps that we can take now to realize the outcome document that Jorge also already mentioned, that Jose also emphasized, the outcome document that explicitly references water and sanitation that we are all really striving to see. So thank you to SWA Secretariat for organizing. Thank you to Mr. Flores. Thank you to Jorge. And thank you to all of you, especially those of you who've sat in on this conversation despite technical difficulties and remain engaged with your questions. We're really excited for all of the steps moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the interpreters for helping us communicate. Have a wonderful day. There are more details about SWA contacts on the screen now. Take care.